There we go. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming. I know we have a lot of people signed up today, so we appreciate your time. I'm Mary Buchanan. I'm a Community Resilience Planner at the Connecticut Institute for Resilience and Climate Adaptation, or CIRCA. I'm joined today by Dr. Yaprak Onat, who is also at CIRCA, as well as Edith Pestana at Connecticut DEEP. So I'm going to turn it over to them really quickly, but just first, a couple ground rules. So as I mentioned, the webinar is being recorded. We will send the recording as well as the slides out to everyone who is registered. There is the chat function, which you've all found because you're putting your names in. So if you have questions as you go along, put them in the chat. I'll be watching the chat. We will have time at the end of the session to get those questions to Yaprak. I think that is it. So Edith, I'll turn it over to you.
So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining. Today starts the beginning of the mapping tool public comment period, and a background on it. UConn has been working on this tool with DEEP as well as with Department of Public Health and other data sources to put together a comprehensive EJScreen mapping tool for the state of Connecticut. The idea behind the creation of this tool came out of the Governor's Council on Climate Change, Environmental Justice, and Equity Working Group. They had a subcommittee regarding investigating mapping tools across the country, and they submitted it as a major recommendation of the GC3. The council voted on it, and here we are. UConn took on the challenge. And I also want to make sure that you understand this particular tool was funded by Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative funding. From that on, it's great to actually complete a recommendation from the GC3, 2 years in the making, and I will hand it over now to Dr. Yaprak Onat. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And let's see. Mary, can you see my screen? Yes, okay, wonderful. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining. And like Edith mentioned and Mary mentioned, we are going to talk about the Connecticut environmental justice screening tool. So just a short introduction that this is our CIRCA team, and these are the people that currently at the team, but this tool has been making in the 2 years. We had like a lot of contribution from different staff members and also agencies as well. So this is just like a very small portion of it, but I'm happy to introduce you how our tool is and what we are working on. So today's presentation, what you're going to learn is how the process of making this tool come to alive. And I'm also going to mention about because it's a tool, it is going to have its own capacity. So what are the limitations and some disclaimers, and how you can use this tool for your purposes, different actions that you can do with this, how the developmental stage and methodology worked on it, what kind of a data is inside. And I'm going to show you a demonstration and how you can actually submit comments and try the tool yourself. As Edith mentioned also that this tool has been in 2 years in the making. In 2021, Governor's Council of Climate Change and Equity and Environmental Justice Working Group identified priority actions for near-term implementation. Among them was the development of a statewide environmental justice tool. So environmental justice tool, if you haven't heard about it before, it's actually estimates a cumulative environmental impact score for each census tract, reflecting what kind of pollutants are there and what kind of vulnerabilities that population has for the pollutants. So it is looking for different kind of how communities, how they are impacted disproportionately from potential pollution sources. And what I mean by the cumulative impact is all these potential pollution sources, different socioeconomic vulnerabilities that community has, or health disparities, are just adding it up to build a cumulative score. So this is basically showing a general idea of where we need to put our attention, where we need to direct our attention and sources for these communities. So the use of this tool, we had the idea, there are different versions of EJScreen tools around. There are nationwide versions too. But the reason that we wanted to do a Connecticut version is a custom fitted dress we wanted to use Connecticut specific data. And while the federal tools are very powerful tool, they are really comparing different types of states within each other, and they are not specified for Connecticut needs. So we are using a local data integration to this. What we are trying to do is an open access tool, so you can use your tablet, phone, or desktop computer to access anywhere with internet connection to this. And we are really hoping this for a policy making. So that you can look at the tool and direct your resources and say that these are the communities that we need to pay attention to improve their life quality. You can use this tool in different levels, like either like state, municipal, or COG level too. So when we come to the tool, it's going to have its own capacity, obviously. So it's not going to solve every problem related to EJ issues. So what this tool does is it's going to identify potential sources of pollution. So if there is a landfill, if there is a brownfield, that's going to show you whether you're living close to that location or not close to that location. It's going to identify, like, the reason that we are putting that emphasis is that if there's some kind of emergency happen or like an hazard happens, like you will actually have an idea of like approximately, again, this is not an exact exposure showing device, approximately know like which communities might be impacted. And it is mostly looking, the cumulative indices are looking in census tract levels. So it's going to show in pollution sources or exposures near those census tract levels. And within that census tract level, it's going to show like what kind of a community is disadvantaged in socioeconomic levels or in health disparities. But there are also limitations for the tool. So some of them are that it's not going to show an actual exposure. So it's not going to say that you have 70% chance of having this pollution or a disease. That tool is not about that. It's not going to show that any kind of individual or a person going to be highly likely, low likely going to be impacted for certain from this. It's going to show a potential. That's why we are emphasizing on that. And it's not going to comment on an individual's health outcome. It's not going to relate to, because of that, you have this pollution, you're definitely going to get this health disease. There is not going to have that kind of causation happening. And it's definitely not going to give any kind of a private information or names. Everything is in census tract level, so anything smaller than that, it's going to have its own error in deciding on environmental justice issues. With that, there is also limitations of mapping too. We are using various data sets. We are using over 50 data sets right now, as of now. And all these data sets that when we are mapping them, they are actually within their own category, they're considered equally weighted. So asthma is equally weighted in terms of like chronic lung disease, or landfill is the same way that with diesel emissions. Can you compare these within each other, whether say that, oh, this is more important, less important? We can't really do that. And that's why everything is equally weighted. And the resolution of data is also different too, because most of the time that we know like the address of the pollution sources or a parcel that's affecting it. On the other hand, for health data, some of them that we only have information in town level, and socioeconomic information, we have it in census tract level. So all of them combined is giving a little bit of data inconsistency, but what we try to do is finalize everything mostly in census tract levels to build up and show you in cumulative indices. So is this going to give a realistic solution to your problems? It is close, and that's why we emphasize that this is a tool for first screening. It's going to show you like, oh, this might happen, these might be impacted. So a more detailed analysis needs to be done by experts or whoever is interested in that area, but it's a good starting point. And when we were creating this tool, of course, we needed to collaborate with multiple different levels of expertise, because there's various data from potential pollution sources to socioeconomic to health-related information. So we needed to get feedback to build up this mapping tool. So how can you use this? You can use this to evaluate areas that require more improvement. Like you can identify the communities in Connecticut that are relatively in poor socioeconomic conditions or like health conditions, or they are potentially having more like pollution sources around them. So you can identify their risk in terms of a policy and planning purposes. And you can also identify these communities which might have like higher potential impacts they can have as a result of that. You can use this for prioritization, and that's what we are really emphasizing it. You have different sources like a grants or a life quality improvement or a health conditions that really this tool is to provide evidence to advocate for improving the life quality and conditions for these overburdened communities. And if you have like businesses, financial institutions in that area, really to emphasize that these you should not add more burden to these communities and improve their conditions. And of course, for decision making, that's what we are hoping to. It's now this tool makes it a transparent communication tool between different stakeholders, from public to state agencies to municipal levels. So we are hoping that it's going to support and uplift the vulnerable communities, including local departments and economic development, education in those regions. And of course, retrospective reporting, because the tool allows different generating data reports and a map, so you can use it for grant applications to prioritize sources for these communities. And of course, education and outreach, because different levels, it can be giving a place-based learning experience starting from high school level to a different, more higher education level, to see what this tool is providing. When we are developing this project, we had different perspectives that we needed to focus on. Of course, it doesn't happen overnight. We get a recommendation report from GC3 Equity and Environmental Justice Work Group, and then we worked more on that in literature to define it better for Connecticut's related data sets that needs to be used. We also had two advisory committees, State Data Advisory Committee and Mapping Tool Advisory Committee, that have been working with us to define which kind of data sources that we need to use. We also did public forums, and now we are starting a public comment period. In addition to that, we've been meeting with state data agencies or different groups to get feedback along the process, because like I mentioned, that every version of this tool is going to improve and to make it better to fit the Connecticut's need. Just a little feedback about like which departments were also in our State Data Advisory Committee. Over the 2 years, we had 5 meetings with the listed agency representatives. So we are very grateful for their contribution. They've been providing us guidance of like what kind of data that we should use to reflect the state's sources and general picture. In addition to that, we also had a Mapping Tool Advisory Committee. The primary role of the Mapping Tool Advisory Committee is to represent different interests that contribute to the environmental justice, including health, transportation, racial injustice, education, and more. And we wanted to refine this. This was a grant program, and we were able to fund it with the help of our grants advisory committee, which helped us to decide on like who we can award. And we awarded 2 organizations and 4 individuals based on their living experience. And we've been meeting with them, like we met 5 times with them as well, and they've been crucial partners for us to improve the aesthetics, to what kind of data that we need to use and how we should represent it, and what kind of additional sources that we need to include in addition to just like a web application. Moreover, we did semi-public forums. The reason that I'm saying semi, because we partnered and funded community-based organizations in 5 towns. They are in Bridgeport, Waterbury, Groton, Hartford, and New Haven. And these organizations opened us their door for us to give a high-level information about what the tool is, and really give their members an opportunity to try using their iPads and phone the previous version of this application, and they provided us feedback. The groups that we met was really variety. Two of them were like Spanish-speaking groups, and the age were just like very variable, and then the level of knowledge was very variable from like a high school level to like a more expert and planner level. So it gives us a good perspective of like how we can address the needs for different kinds of stakeholders. Talking about the project timeline, this project started in August 2021, and we had multiple versions. These are the versions that you are seeing over here. And along the way, on these versions are created, we got feedback, constant feedback from like STAG and MTAG members and community forums. And now we are here in the public comment period, which I'm going to demonstrate the version 1.5. After that, we have the public comment period. We are going to integrate those comments to create the version 2.0, which is CIRCA is contracted to finish during this project year. And the public comment period starts today, and it is till the end of July 30. So it's going to be 15 days. When we are creating this tool, we follow the just like a basic methodology that I'm talking about. Obviously, every kind of a detail is, while creating a different data set is going to be different, but we documented this on our report as well. So the general idea is that the data collection, we got the suggestions, and then we specify those suggestions, like what can fit to our state needs. And we use different environmental pollution, health, and socioeconomic related information. Then it goes to the part of indicator selection. So depending on the state specific needs and priorities, various indicators are selected. These indicators provided to calculate like a numerical representation of the environmental justice, injustice that is in the region. So for all the indicators in the same category are equally weighted, meaning that like a municipal transfer station, same as like with landfill, same as like with brownfields, like within the same category, all the indicators are considered equally weighted. And in addition to that, like we needed to do a numerical representation. So whatever the kind of a data that we are using, the raw values that I mentioned is like the information that we get it for that specific data, that we convert them to the indicators and components by processing percentiles and normalizing a rank score. And when we were doing this indicator and map presentation, you'll see that some colors are darker, some colors are lighter. So it's going to show like a higher impact, a lower impact. And the way that we decided to this is if it is like a pollution source, we decided on based on the proximity. If it is a socioeconomic layer, we decided based on its really value. If it is a health layer, most of the time that the rates are based on the deciles. So this is just like an explanation of like how the proximity based like weighting happens. So the idea is that the closer that you're living to the pollution source, the more impacted that you're going to be. And like I mentioned, that there's going to be a percentile and a rank presentation. And when I mean that by the percentile is a statistical term, which is a specific proportion of the data points in a data set holds. So for example, when we are saying that percentile just shows like where you are within a whole data set. Are you in the higher percentile or a lower percentile? What I do to explain this, if you have like 100 babies in a room and you have a baby that has the weight of like 98 percentile, that just means that that baby is in the top 2 heaviest baby in the whole room. So you can consider it like it's a place-based representation. And by utilizing the percentiles allow us to understand how a particular census tract compares to the rest of the data set within its position. So for example, if it's a 20th percentile, it is above the 20th percentile of the observations or census tracts that's being found. And in addition to that, because percentiles can be confusing in general, and we don't want it to definitely mistaken by like a percent. Definitely you're going to have this much percent of a chance. We normalize them to make it an easy decile representation. So meaning that the ranges are going from 0 to 10. So with that, it's helped us to show a relative rank and an easy representation of like where that census tract is ranging. And at the end, we are making is a relative comparison. This comparison from the impact ranks are for considering all the census tracts in the Connecticut. So that representation, you will not be able to compare it just the impact rank with a different state in a different neighborhood. It's just for whole state comparison that you're going to see that. Now we move into the cumulative index calculation, meaning that I mentioned in the beginning that we are looking at cumulative impact score. So actually adding all these indicators on top of each other and making like a hamburger, you can consider that. And so to give a bite size information. So if you don't want to look for just like a single information, single indicator, we represented them in different categories like pollution related category and sensitive population related category. And now we calculate all this information within those categories are just combination of all these indicators. And mapping, when we are representing it, like I mentioned that we have represented from 0 to 10 score. So the idea is the darker the colors that you are seeing, the higher the rankings are and higher the potential cumulative impact for that community has. Now we go to the data categorization, and the data, we have a lot of data. So we have if you don't want to deal with all the little different information or different cumulative indices, if you just want to get like one information, environmental justice index, that's going to answer to you all, because environmental justice index is your Big Mac. It has every information in it. Every indicator, it's combined information. That's the main index that you can look for to display the disparities. But if you want to go deep dive into it, there are two main categories that we divide into. One is the pollution burden, and pollution burden is just all the pollution related, potential pollution related problems. So we divided that into two other categories: potential pollution sources and potential pollution exposure. Potential pollution sources are point-based information. So you know exactly which parcel, which location that source is. And then we are deciding it based on that, whether you're living close to that location or not close to that location. Potential pollution exposure, on the other hand, it's more like air transmit. It's like related to emissivity. So it doesn't have like an exact location, but it's going to release in a bigger area. So that's how we represent it in the category. Both of them combined, giving the potential pollution burden. But there's also another category, which we call sensitive population. The reason that we call this, because without even the environmental burden that these communities are going through, they are already susceptible, they're already sensitive, they're already carrying a burden within itself because they are sensitive populations. And that burden comes from either socioeconomic disparities or health-related disparities, and that's why we divided into those two categories. So we have also prepared a fact sheet, so I'm just going to go over them very quickly. But if you look for the examples of like the potential pollution sources, from brownfields, the Superfund sites, the incinerators, the recycling processing facilities, they are all like, we know the source and where that potential source is going to be. So most of them are based on like whether you're living close to that or not close to that. The other category, exposure, as you can see, from diesel emissions, ozone levels, to major minor air pollution sources, to traffic density, they are really releasing into a bigger area. So that's how we decide on those. These two categories gives the potential pollution burden. And we also have the sensitive population, socioeconomic factors. All of the information are getting that we obtained it from American Community Survey. So it has its own census tract errors that's coming with it, but that is the reason that we go with the tracks is that has less error and a more accuracy. And of course, the health sensitivity and the data from that is mostly coming from Department of Public Health and also CDC. So we used and combined these to represent the general health disparities or biosusceptibility that communities might have. In the project, what we are preparing it is not just like a web application. Yes, you'll have a web application in Spanish and English language, and you are also going to have the project website, which Mary can put the link in the chat. And the processed files, the indicators and composite indices that we created are also for public use. So expert users, like GIS users, can download them using our ArcGIS Data Hub. In addition to that, it might not be like super natural to use a web application complex. So we prepare different user manuals in both Spanish and English, and these user manuals from like a small 2-page fact sheets to just the widget descriptions to a PDF big documentation step-by-step video tutorial, and we are aiming to translate them all both in English and Spanish. Most of them are done, and we are making it open for public as well. And finally, the engagement materials. We have a fact sheet. We have like general information like how people can use this tool, list of grants, resources that you can apply to or contact with, ideas of like how to use this tool for different stakeholders, from individuals to state agencies to town, municipal officers, and how the different states use this kind of tools, because there are actually 17 states that have their own EJ tool, and Connecticut now is part of them too. And we are also right now preparing a high school curriculum, class curriculum to teach this tool to, and you'll have access to a final report as well. So this is just in glance like what it looks like, when I'm going to dive deep into it. Now, you can use this QR code, but we can also go now to our website. So Connecticut Environmental Justice .circa.edu. When you go to our project website, there are different information here. You can go to all the resources under the resources tab to learn more about the methodology, reach the final report and everything. You can learn more detailed information about the data, user guides, and the maps and data. Any other information about like how our engagement processes and advisory committees are found from here too. When you go down, you can see that there's a submit feedback, and there's also a way to reach the Spanish version and English version of the application. There are also fact sheet, the quick links for all the information are provided here too. So when you click on this, I'm going to open up for faster. So you'll first welcomed with this splash screen. It's going to tell you what this tool is about and what it doesn't. So the disclaimer is still here, and how you can reach the general information from it. The first map that you see is the Environmental Justice Index. So that's the big map that I was talking about. And before we dive into like what kind of information that it has, we just want to tell you that there are different features here. The first one is navigation features. So you have a find address here. So you can type in any address or a town name. You'll be able to find this here. You can zoom in or zoom out. You can go to the general map extent. And if your IP address allows on your location, then you can go to your address exact location. These are our navigation tools. The colorful widgets is all these icons that I call them widgets. Colorful widgets represent all the data that I've been talking about, which we're going to dive deep into it. On the right, we have more information tools. So right now you are seeing an information from a desktop computer. So depending on which device that you're looking for, if you're looking for an iPad, it might be squished a little bit. So just like look at on the right side, if you see more, and then click on it, and then you'll see all the icons. Regardless, every information that you're seeing here should be visible in phone and tablet. It's just like the places that it goes might be different. So in this map, if I click on any census tract, what I'm going to see, a pop-up screen that's going to open. So in this pop-up screen, I can make it bigger, and it's going to say that what information that I'm looking for, environmental justice index for this census tract in Portland, city of Portland and Middlesex County. So the first information that's going to give is going to give you the rank and which percentile it is and which rank it is. So it's 3.7 out of 10. So it is in a low impact area. And it's also tell you like what it means. The higher the scores that you are seeing, the darker the colors are, and the more potentially impacted you might be. The next paragraph is going to give you a very brief information about like what you're seeing right now. I'm seeing environmental justice index and its description. And since it is a cumulative index, it's going to give a different information about like how many people are there, how much percent under federal poverty level, a median income rate, and all this information. Next, you'll have a graph, which you'll be able to see that whether it's like which factor is contributing more, whether it's sensitive population or pollution burden. And another one that I'll be able to see that also is that which are the other composite indices are contributing more from pollution exposure, pollution sources, health sensitivity, and socioeconomic factors. So I can see that socioeconomic factors is contributing less, and the pollution sources and pollution exposure is contributing more. Now then I can go into, let me go. I can go into my layers. So the widgets. So the one that is active is already here. I can uncheck it and check it and see my information. And the orange one represents the cumulative indices. So if I want to see just like the general pollution burden, I can click on it and see again the similar fashion, like what is the rank of it, what it means, what is the description. And I can see that pollution burden is a composite index. So whether pollution sources or pollution exposure is contributing high. And I can see here that pollution exposure is contributing high for that area. If I want to see the rank, what the colors represent, I can click on the one next to it. Or there is a legend icon here. That's what we don't have any. Okay, now it shows. Whichever the map is active, the legend is going to show that. So in the pollution exposure layer, I can go in and see a list of information, like a list of all the indicators that's contributing. What that means is that the first, I know for the census tract, the score is 8.2, so it is high. And I can look at all the other numbers whenever I see, oh, there's like minor air pollution sources are 9. So there's a lot of like emission in that area. So I can understand that. Whereas noise levels seems like low. So I can give that I can learn that kind of information from these scores. You can do the same thing with sensitive populations, goes the score, and then what that layer represents. And I can see that, oh, health sensitivity is contributing higher here. Socioeconomic factors, again, a list of information, and that I can see it. Health sensitivity, same way, I can see a list of information in that area. All right. So if I want to learn specific information, like every composite index is on the top, but if I want to go more specific, like educational attainment, I can go here. The first, the score. Second is like what that layer is. And if I want to learn more information, I can click here, and the two pager is going to pop up. It's going to tell me like how it is related to the EJ information, what this indicator represents, what is the data source, and how the percentiles and ranks are calculated, and also the work cited. We have that these two pagers for every indicator that you are seeing right now. So if you don't want to go dive deep into the report, you'll be able to still access this information. Health layers are mostly in town level, but you can see again, like what is their ranking, what it represents, their scores, and then more information you can obtain that. And some of them also have like the state level information as well. Pollution exposure, I'm going very quickly, but this is a time that you can go like more dive into it after this. What the score is, what that layer represents, and two-pager general information about that layer. So let's go back to the CT EJ index. I'm going to mention about these tools and features that you can use. So here we have first the legend. The second one is that you can actually put like distressed municipalities on top of this, or environmental justice block groups. We also have town boundaries and census tracts too. You can change the base map. The base map is the map that's underneath to any kind of a ESR provided layer. There's also, if you don't remember all these and don't want to dive into it, there's a general like data and representation, what kind of information is used, what are the general names of these categories, and how to interpret this map information here. Next, we have the widget names, so you can see like what they are in big. All these information on our website in user guide tab too. Next, we have swipe. So generally, you can see that I'm just displaying one layer at a time. This feature allows it to go like 2 different layers, put them on. The one on the top is the left, and the one on the right is on the bottom. So I can sweep through them and I'll see what it is impacting. If I didn't have this layer, you can see that I have like 2 layers are open, but I'm not able to see them. So that's the issue with these mapping tools, that they have to, like, you cannot really display multiple layers at the same time. The colors are just going to go like a mess. But there are good features. So one of them is a chart feature. So I can choose either like a whole map area, current map area, or I can specify a user-defined area and apply. And what you are seeing right now, I'm going to make it bigger, is an index layer for all the towns. So I can see that, oh, which town has like a high score. So you can create these charts. You can print a map. It takes a little while to load, but whichever the area that you are selecting, it's really nicely puts like legend, information, and all these things. There's also a reporting feature that we really think that it's very useful. You can either write the name of the place here, or you can draw it. And my connection is a little bit slow, seems like, so I'm going to take it a minute to do it. But this reporting feature allows it to, all right, let's give the reporting feature a little time to load, to actually report for the grant applications. So you can use a filter if you just want to see the census tracts that are above like 9 as index layer. I can put it over there, so 1, and then you can see like which those census tracts are. You can see that all the scores are above 9, and that is from the filter feature. You can jump through places. We identified some of the most burdened areas due to these map, so you can jump into them and then go like dive more into it. You can select an area where, all right, I'm going to choose like a rectangle in this census tracts that I choose here. You can see that 14 census tracts that I chose. And the best feature about this is that I'll be able to create my own layer if I want to. I can look for the tabled out information for all these census tracts under here, or I can look up the statistics. So there is like, for example, I want to see like a general pollution exposure statistics. I can see that like for all the 14 ones, what is the average 6.5 minimum, maximum, standard deviation, all that information that you can reach that. Let's see if the reporting is working. I'll try to do that in a bit, but it works. It really works. So you can also do another thing, that you can add your own layers. You can either use like a URL, or you can upload your own file, or you can just like add like another layer that you're looking for ArcGIS Online or from your map. So let's say that I want to add like flood layer. I can look, oh, USA flood hazards. I can add that. And then I can actually add that. So I'll just put that in a bit while I'm screen sharing. So these are general features, and I'm going to go to now, while it is loading, our general website, you can look for the Connecticut Environmental Justice. Now you can see that second link is us. How you can submit a feedback. You can go to submit feedback here. The only thing is required is like your email, whether you want us to connect you. And there's different features that you can submit, but if you want to do like multiple information, then you can use this feature tool to do that. And I'm gonna take a break for 1 second to figure out like why that is not showing, but the screening feature, but that is it for now. Thank you. Thanks so much for listening. Internet connection is killing me.
Thank you, Yaprak. We've got a lot of questions coming in. I'm just, the link to the public forum page, public feedback page was earlier in the chat. I'm just going to put it in again so that you guys don't have to scroll back through all the questions. Okay, and then are you ready to start taking questions?
Yes.
Okay, we've got a couple that I think will be quick, so I'm going to do those first. First is a logistical question. Can you include the chat with the recording so we have a record of who was here? Yes, we can do that. Next one, is this mapping tool created in Esri dashboard?
Yes.
It's yeah, and I think it is specifically web app builder. Is that right?
Yes, it is specifically web app builder.
Yeah. Are proximity to airports and highways considered?
Yes. So airports and highways are considered for noise levels and also different pollutions. If the different pollution layers already have them, that yes, it is considered. And traffic density.
Okay, great. Where does the noise data come from?
Very good questions. I'm gonna actually look at this all together. I'm gonna share my screen real quick. So you can go to the noise, and I'm gonna turn off my EJ there. You can go to the noise, and then go down and click here. And U.S. Department of Transportation Bureau of Transportation Statistics National Transportation Noise Map of 2018. You can click on this, and you can go to the main source. And you can do that for all the information. All the indicators are, we always put the source.
All right. Are the EJ block groups derived from the tool or from a previous mapping effort?
EJ block groups are defined, there are statute-defined block groups, and they are also in Connecticut DEEP's website, and they are previous efforts.
The colors obscure the street map. Is there a way to lighten the color coding so we can see the streets underneath?
Of course. You can, I just mentioned like general things, but yes. Let me quickly show this. But I'm looking the noise right now, and if I want to go these 3 dots, I can adjust the transparency, and I can see like more clearly. You can also change the base map to make this, let's add like a street map. Voila.
Great. Is there a draw option to outline a specific area on the map to look at the demographics there? I think that came in before you demonstrated those tools. Yes.
You can also, when my internet connection is like not failing me, with the report feature, you can actually create whichever that area that you wanted, and you're gonna have like full reports of like what are the ranks, what are the minority population, unemployment, median income, all that information, and an image of a map in one document.
All right, we've got a couple questions about who will update the tool, how will the tool be updated, how going forward?
Very good question. So CIRCA is contracted till mid-August, and we are updating until then. But after that, this is a partnership between DEEP, and DEEP is going to take over. Edith, do you want to add?
Hi, so yes, so we are hiring an environmental analyst to maintain the tool, to assist people with understanding the tool and updating all the data as it comes in, including from permits and other information, and of course the US Census data. As it becomes available, it will be updated. It is a living tool. It's not stagnant. Data is always coming in. Data comes in new. That we might find that there's new data that we should add, a new category that we didn't consider first, right? So, and we do follow what other states are doing and what they're looking at for indicators. So it's a living tool. So it will be updated regularly by Deep with a specific staff person dedicated to it, as well as our GIS administrator, Stuart DeLand.
Thank you, Edith. Okay, a couple more quick ones, and then I know we have some more involved questions in the chat. We are going to get to those too. How long is the public comment period open?
Till the end of, till the beginning of July 31st.
So beginning of August, end of July. Yes, okay. Is there a place we can call or go for technical support?
You can put our emails here. You can go to that, but technical support in addition to that is we have the user guides, but if you want just one-on-one, just text me, call me, but first email me.
Okay, great. And I will put our emails in the chat as soon as I ask the next one. The Eastern Pequot Reservation is subverted to the North Stonington Census Tract, which would effectively erase their particular sensitivities and disqualify them as a separate community. Is there another on-ramp for tribal lands?
That is an extremely good question. So unfortunately, because the census tracts have their own errors, we are limited to their understanding, and that's why it is diluting it. And one of the disclaimers that we have to say that any kind of injustice that happens smaller than the census tract levels, this tool is not going to be able to capture that. And tribal nations are actually going with that category. One way to help out is we put an add data feature. So communities, non-profit organizations, anybody who wants to create their map, that they can actually add their own boundaries and add their own data into it. Unfortunately, for the tribal information, we will not be able, we couldn't get it so far. Really detailed information so that we couldn't include it. But if the experts have that already, they can create their own map.
Great, thank you. Is flooding considered a pollutant, with the example of raw sewage in basements?
That's also very important, especially Hartford is dealing with that too. Flooding is not considered as a pollution. We have a different type. We have a wastewater discharge as a layer, and that is considered as a pollution layer. But the flooding is more the climate change related issue, and CIRCA has a climate change vulnerability index tool that specifically looks for the flood vulnerability. We have that within this tool because the resolution is big, like in census tracts, it's not as fine as the climate change vulnerability index. It was not really reflecting a very good picture for the state. So it was considered as like a context layer, which you can edit while you're displaying the map, as like I showed you before.
All right. Why did you use EPA cancer and respiratory hazard data instead of CDC? And then a related question, are health outcomes or measure data available at the tract level from the CDC or BRFFs?
Very good question. Most of the CDC data is in county level, which is worse. And that's one of the reasons that we use like EPA's air toxic assessment, cancer risk and respiratory risk index to put it over there. And yeah, that's why we are going with that. BRFSS has some information, which whenever we found that information, those are generally model estimates, not actual recordings. We use that for depression and mental health. We try to get the actual data as much as possible. So whatever that we couldn't get it from the Public Health in a reasonable resolution and a updated version, like the time frame wise, that we try to go with like the CDC's BRFSS model-based estimate information. But the rest is just like that. Hope that answers the question.
Similar question about scale. Why were census tracts used rather than census block groups?
Census block groups. So American Community Survey has most of our socioeconomic related information. And these are surveys from like a small group and are projected into a bigger area. And when we are doing that, census tracts has a better accuracy levels and less errors compared to the block groups.
Are there any plans to add climate change data in the future, such as flood, heat, or sea level rise?
Flood, heat, and sea level. So sea level rise, yes, we are going to add this as like a context layer. And CIRCA flood layers are going to be added as like a context layer. We are actually working on that right now for the version 2.0. The other additional flood heat related information is in a very dense, like 10-acre resolution. We have it already in the climate change vulnerability index.
Right, which is another CIRCA tool,
Mm-hmm.
which I can put the link to that in the chat as soon as I ask the next question. Do the layers include legacy pollution?
I'm not sure to answer this. I don't think that I have expertise to answer this because the pollution related specific information, we get it from deep experts and staff. So if that layer already had the legacy pollution in it, then yes, but I have to look deep into that.
I guess you would have to define what legacy means because it does include brownfields, right?
Yes,
Brownfields
that's
have a
true.
legacy of contamination. It also includes like potentially contaminated sites that have a history of being contaminated that are slated to be cleaned up. So it does include, if that's your question, those sites that historically were industrial that are now maybe not acting anymore. They're not in business anymore, but it does include that data as well. I would look at brownfields, and I would also look at under, I'm looking at here at the list, the potentially contaminated cleanup sites list, which is quite extensive.
All right, we have another scale question. How did you get from the coarser resolution state/county to the tract?
We didn't use any county, so that is the way. The worst, like coarser. I don't want to say worst because every data is different. The coarser resolution that we had for health layers, they were in town level, and at that point we had to do an approximation in a way that like all the tracks that have in that town is considered the same. So the health layers that you're visualizing in town levels, you're just gonna see the town level information. But when we are calculating the composite indices, we just considered all the tracks are having the same information. And that's also one of the limitations of the mapping.
All right, follow up on the earlier question about tribal lands. Will there be support available for the tribes so that we are included?
We are open definitely to any kind, like we are open to support. I guess it depends on the support. Like if creating a map kind of information, yes, CIRCA is happy to support, definitely. Creating a grant kind of information that is, we don't have that available. CIRCA doesn't have that available right now. Need to defer to Edith. Is that any grant available?
Not at the moment. But I can certainly see adding the boundaries of the state recognized tribes and the federally recognized tribes. But I will say that if there was a source of pollution or contamination on the state recognized tribes, it would have been included in this tool.
Thank you, Edith. All right, next question. How are mitigants included? For example, one can picture two communities in two different cities with virtual identical pollution levels and sensitivities. In one city, there are efforts to mitigate the effects of pollution in place. In the other, there are not. How is that included in the mapping?
Mitigation measures. Okay, so I'm going to answer this in two ways. So one is that if there's like an active mitigation measure that we don't have it in the list of layers, that is not included. The other way is, the way of including is that if the data already has, if you're asking if the data already has, like, there are two pollution sources and then one is like, because of the mitigation measures that it has like less exposure, whether that's counted. If it is not under the exposure layers and it's already incorporated within the indicator, that's not really going to show that. Pollution sources only shows like the close proximity as well. So if one location is doing more efforts to reduce that pollution source, it's not going to be reflected. It's only by distance wise. And that's the referred to, it's not showing the actual pollution exposure values in mapping.
Thank you, Yaprak. I see we're at 1. There are a couple questions about statistics, it looks like, coming from Debs. It might be better, Debs, we can send you an email or set up another time to talk if those questions aren't answered in the full report. We had a question coming in about, sorry, I'm getting the spinning wheel. With the Supreme Court ruling to end affirmative action, has there been discussion about potential impacts on this tool specific to the use of race as an indicator? CIRCA doesn't really, because that's more of a legal question, CIRCA isn't really the entity to answer that question. I know Annie Decker is legal at DEEP, so she might be
the only thing that I can say that marginalized groups and different races are considered in the EJ tool. That's the only answer that I can give for that.
But also white populations are included as well. So it's not like one factor is weighing over another with respect to race and ethnicity. Is that correct?
Back to me.
Yeah.
So minoritized, like, yes, we show a distribution of like white populations versus the non-white communities, but most historically non-white communities are more taking the burden, so that is reflected as a separate indicator too.
All right, last one, or sorry, 2 more, real quick. What particular data is different between the CT tools and other state tools?
That's not very quick.
At once, but in terms of, we have the list available
Yes.
on the fact sheet and on the data pages. And I believe we actually have a page on the EJScreen website about some examples of other state tools and what they're doing with their tools. So I will link to that page in the chat.
But I can assure you that we try to create the tool specifically state, because different states like California, Washington, they have like different pollution layers that they were able to incorporate it. Some of the times that we didn't use that because either we didn't have the available data statewide in a good high resolution, or either that was not really related to our case.
And just background history, during the GC3 process, we had the state of Washington present their EJ screening tool model, which is really sort of the primary guidance that we followed, because their tool incorporated outreach to the community to get feedback as to what challenges the communities feel is important to include. And one of the feedbacks that we got early on was noise was really important to people. So, we followed that one, but of course, you know, everyone, the largest screening tool in the country belongs to California, who has spent over $10 million on that development. So ours is a little bit a 2-year development, less years, but you know, as time goes on, who knows how large this will get and how much more data will be included in it as we move forward.
Thank you, Edith. Okay. I think there was someone asked, will this recording be available? Yes, we will send it out to everyone who registered. There was a follow-up about the creating data for tribes. So will tribes can CIRCA help tribes create their own layers? Creating map layers and maps is something that CIRCA can help with. Yes. I think I have gotten everything else. If I've missed you, there was a lot coming in the chat. Yaprak and my emails are both in the chat. You can email us. And Debs, I'll send an email connecting you and Yaprak so you can talk more about the statistics as well.
And I just want to mention that this is like a public comment period. This is a live tool, meaning that any kind of a mistake or any kind of a missing link, broken things, or like you have an idea that, hey, we should add this actually. That's why we have this public comment period. So there's going to be shortcomings. We are still working on it while you're commenting to create the 2.0, and we really greatly appreciate your guidance of showing us like what we can do to improve it and fit it for Connecticut's needs.
Mm-hmm. And you should also know that the way that the health data is presented is to respect privacy, right?
Yes.
Which is really important, is the privacy of the population. And so that was taken into account as well.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Yaprak. Thank you, Edith.
Thank you so much.
I think we can let you all go now. I hope everyone has a great day.
Thank you, everybody, for attending.
Thank you for attending.
Thank you, Yaprak and Mary, for all your work. It's very appreciated.
Edith.